work for the Delaware Nutrient Management Commission. We're part of the Department of Agriculture. So the reason I'm speaking today about neighbor relations is very simple. If anybody calls a complaint into the Department of Agriculture here in Delaware, it lands on my desk. So I'm the guy that kind of deals with it all, neighbor relations. It's a big part of my job. So I just wanted to hit some of the high points of some things that I look for when I respond to a complaint from a neighbor of a poultry farm. So without further ado here, you guys, Jamie Arn, in disguise.
Yeah. Dark glasses.
Yeah,
Dark hat.
okay. So anyway, usually the complaints that we get here in Delaware, feel free to comment as you see fit.
It'll be about the same.
Yeah, flies are a big thing, odors. I think we all know what it is. Mortalities being taken off site, all that sort of thing. Normally the first thing that I do when I get on the farm, aside from getting up with a farmer, is go out to the compost. Make sure that the farmer is keeping the mortalities well covered with manure. That's very important. It's very common for me to see birds on top because they've just gone through the houses. They haven't had time to bury the birds yet. I always implore the farmer to, please bury the birds, bury them now, bury them deep. Another thing I look for at the composter to see whether there's a lot of what I call goo coming through the composter boards, because what that tells me is the compost recipe is really not correct. The birds are probably not breaking down correctly. Going to get odors, going to get flies, going to have the carcasses in there for various vermin, vultures, all that sort of thing to get in there, dig them out, and take them off site. I like to see, it's not a legal requirement, but I definitely like to see the recipe posted somewhere in the vicinity, just so that if the farmer is not doing the composting, if there's a hired hand, somebody like that, somebody who's just doing some substitution for the day, they know how to mix everything up in the composting bin. A very common thing that I see is a lack of a carbon source. So I do like I always ask the farmer, do you have some straw? Do you have some wood chips? If so, can you show me where you keep them? Do you use them? If the answer is no, then my first step is to say, look, you need to get some. Go out, make some calls, get some, and start using them. We have a state technical standard here in Delaware. We'll get them a copy of that. It shows how to mix everything up and all that. Make sure they're wetting everything down. And we have a gigantic thermometer. And while farmers don't have to have the same gigantic thermometer, and I apologize, I forgot to bring it today, but it's about like that. It's got a big head. It's about this far around, and you can stick it right in there and make sure you're cooking the birds up 160 or above, and you're turning them really to dust or to ash. That's what we're looking for. So okay, so anyway, that's the composter. That's usually critical point number one. The next thing that I look for, particularly if we're getting fly or odor complaints, see if there's a lot of manure spilled out on the farm. If so, always ask the farmer, please scoop it up, please keep it scooped. Go to the heavy use pads. Not all farms have those, but increasingly they're getting them. I see, the farm here has them. You can't have too much concrete for me. I mean, I love that. So I like to see that the pads are swept clean and they're kept clean. We do understand there are times, particularly when a farmer is shipping birds, that there's going to be some spillage. That's okay, but once you're done with that operation, we'd like you to clean that up. Generally, we look at the tunnel fans. There's no real violation there. I mean, if you have a tunnel fan, everyone does. You just have one. But it always helps the appearance of the farm if they're kept clean, you know, if they're power washed occasionally so they don't have a lot of dust and feathers and such. And so once we get that squared away on the farm, we can go back to the neighbor and we can tell them, look, I mean, the farmer is doing everything to comply with the nutrient management law here in Delaware. They're doing everything they can to practice proper, good agricultural practice, and they're trying to be a good neighbor. And really, you know, you've done everything you can. Really, everything I've talked about so far is housekeeping. We do normally take a quick look at the farmer's records, and that just shows good faith on the part of the farmers. And for somebody who is poultry only, which typically in Delaware that's not uncommon at all, we normally will look and see that they're keeping a record of how much manure they're exporting off the farm. Again, that doesn't really go directly to any complaint from a neighbor, but it does show that the farmer's making every effort to operate good professional practice. It also allows me to help the farmer because in addition to dogging the farmers out about housekeeping and neighbor relations, I'm also the guy who writes the checks for nutrient relocation. And just so you know, if anybody's interested, in Delaware it's 12 cents per ton per mile. And if you're ever having trouble finding a home for your manure, if you go clean out or crust out and the shed's getting full, call me. My card is in on the registration desk, and I'm the guy that can maybe help you make that happen, get the manure off the farm. In Delaware, any farm that has 37,500 or more chickens is considered a medium CAFO, and they generally have a CAFO permit. So let's see a show of hands. CAFO, does anybody know what that means?
Yeah.
Everybody knows what that means. They call it CAFO, by the way, if you get out west of the Mississippi River. It's the same thing. So at that point, if I go out and I see that there's enough discharged manure or enough mortalities kind of, you know, being dragged off the farm and all that, enough that would be considered a discharge of nutrients from the farm. Oh, and by the way, folks, feathers would count in that too. Then often the CAFO guys will get involved because it may be a violation of the farmer's CAFO permit. When I first come out, it's an informal thing. We work with the farmers. The farmers are on cooperative. That's 1% of the time. It's very unusual. Then things have to get more formal and more legal, and then the CAFO guys, they get involved. You don't want that. That's a big hassle. We don't want it because it's a big hassle for the Department of Ag. So we want to work with you informally first. Some other things I look for underneath the feed bins. Occasionally there'll be some grains, some feed spilled. That normally does not cause a neighbor complaint, but it can cause an increase in mice, rats, and all that coming out. So we see that as an issue, so we'll normally ask the farmer to clean that up and make whatever repairs are necessary to solve that problem. I'm going to turn the floor over to Jim Passwaters, who is the guru of vegetative buffers, and this man, folks, he's a hero. And he's a hero because what he does planting the vegetative buffers really leads to good mental health on my part because it really cuts down on the number of complaints that I get. And I'm going to be over here. If anybody has any questions after we're done here, just come over and see me, and I'll try and answer any questions that you have. Jim, the floor is yours.
My name's Jim Passwaters. I work for Delmarva Poultry Industry, and I've just passed my 10-year anniversary there. We got started in the tree buffer program around the year 2001 when everybody was starting to switch to tunnel fans. Worked with a guy some of you may have known as Bob Coleman that worked at the University of Delaware Extension, and he had the foresight to realize that the tunnel fans were going to cause a little bit of complaints with all the dust and stuff coming out. So we started experimenting with tree buffers way back in 2001 and putting them in. 2007, DPI hired me because we had installed more tree buffers than anybody on Delmarva. And we are still doing it. As you can see, we planted a buffer down here on the organic farm, and there's various species here just as an experimental thing so that in the future farmers can come and see what different trees look like and how they work. And because they're required to provide shade for the chickens, we planted the trees up close so there's shade there available as well. One of the best things you can do for neighbor relations is plant the trees. We've seen trees that were planted in the year 2000, 2001. They're 30, 40, 50 feet tall now, and you drive by and you can hardly even see that there's a chicken house there. The thought process was if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. We've done a lot of research, not myself in particular, but to the scientists, that show that the tree buffers help eliminate odor, they help eliminate sound, and they help eliminate the dust coming off of the farms. So it's a really big beneficial thing. One of the things we found too, and it hadn't happened in Delaware, any Maryland farmers here, there's a big push in Maryland from the environmental people about chicken farms going up. So Accomack County, Worcester County, Wicomico County, what's the other one? Somerset County, there's too many counties in Maryland, now have all enacted new ordinances that any new chicken farms have to have the tree buffers. And the reason that they did that was because they found through the work that we had done, they visited farms that had tree buffers established and everything, and they were able to determine that if it has a tree buffer, it's going to be an effective screen and help out with neighbor relationships. If we hadn't had those buffers in, I'm not sure what would have happened, but that was one of the main things that caused the ordinances and to keep the chicken farms going down in Maryland. As you can see, they're very hard to see because the grasses are dormant this time of year. We planted a row of grasses in front of the tunnel fans. These grasses will get up, 8-10 feet tall, and it will capture 90% of all the dust and feathers. Very inexpensive to do, no maintenance at all. And I heard Bob talk about carbon. We did one farm in Maryland where they planted the grasses all the way down the whole length of their chicken farm, and they cut it down in the spring, and they didn't know what to do with the stuff, so they used it in the composter. And the lady called and said, "That was the greatest thing we ever did. We got a second use, didn't have to buy anything, and it helped the composting extremely well." There are cost share programs. I'm not sure how much money there is. Jamie might be able to tell you, but there is cost share programs that help pay for the trees, the establishment. Now, if you take cost share money, you got to follow their rules. If you pay for it yourself, you can pretty much do whatever you wish to do on that. They have specific species that have been tested that work pretty well. There's irrigation will be required if you do the cost share, and then there's I think it's a 15-year contract that you're required to abide by with the cost share program. The new farms going up in Maryland, the farmers are having to pay for those themselves, the buffers in. There's no cost share available for them. So when they're building a farm, they have to factor the cost of the new buffers in between in the cost of doing their building. I know that NRCS, I've worked with them for years, likes the idea of planting the grasses in front of the tunnel fans. When you look on a chicken farm, that's the place that gets the most complaints, other than the composting stuff. But because they blow out, make a lot of noise, we learned real quick that you don't eat lunch in front of the tunnel fans because you never know when they're going to kick on. So it's they do ranking when you apply for cost share. If you put the grasses in, that raises up your ranking level for other opportunities as well. And the grasses are extremely inexpensive to put in. So I would highly recommend, if you have tunnel fans and you don't have them, to put them in. We've done some smoke tests and stuff, and everybody looks at the outside, but it's important to put them on the inside as well. Down in the swales, the grasses will withstand the water, all that kind of stuff, and it helps eliminate you from mowing in some of those areas as well. But the smoke test showed that when you kick on the two houses, what happens is they hit each other and they go straight up into the air. When we put the grasses in there, it stops it and it keeps it down low so it doesn't go to the neighbor's yard and so forth like that. As I said, we've been putting in the buffers since 2001. Maybe I've worked with somebody that I've just seen so many people that I'm not sure. I would highly recommend that you put it in, especially anybody doing new construction. Delaware doesn't have any requirements at this point of putting the buffers in, but it helps the neighbors, helps keep their complaints down. This guy, Mr. Hawkins, has planted a buffer along the edge of the road. When we do the buffers on poultry farms that are cost shared through NRCS, they're required to be a certain distance, because what we have found is that the closer to the buildings, the better it is for hiding the dust. Because what will happen in areas like this, if you didn't have all the grass and stuff, the wind might blow this way and just take it all away. But if you've got some trees in there, it will help capture. And we're continually experimenting, because we were at a farm where the wind hits the end of the houses and it almost looks like a Venturi on a carburetor. It blows right down those houses at a higher speed, and it picks the dust and feathers up that's laying on the ground and, you know, making them go up into the atmosphere. So what we're trying to do now is putting grasses this way as well to help block that wind, or putting in some low growing grasses and don't mow any area from that end of the tunnel fan and let the feathers and stuff capture that, and the wind will help hold it. So my job with DPI is to go around and help you evaluate what you need. I can help you with some of the cost share programs. I don't sign the checks. Jamie's group does that. But you know, we've done enough. If you have questions on maintenance of any buffers, if you have any questions about the installation or costs or anything like that, please give me a call. My number's on the website, and I visit a lot of farms. Anybody have any questions?
In the winter time, do you recommend cutting the grasses?
I don't recommend cutting them in the winter, maybe in the spring, because sometimes the tunnel fans do run in the wintertime and the grass stay up pretty tall, the ones that we use, so it still actually works as a buffer. So in the early spring, maybe this time of year, if you want to cut them down, you can. You don't have to, because the grass will continue to grow. Any other questions?
Jim, how close to the fans can grasses be planted?
As an experiment one time, I planted grasses 2 feet in front of the fan, just to see how they work, and they survive. The grasses are extremely tough. They like the moisture and the ammonia coming out as the liquid fertilizer for them. The recommended is 10 feet in front of the fan. The maximum we found with tests is 20 feet. So they're 20 feet away, not nearly as effective. Dr. Hong Lee did some experiments on a farm with the grasses, because everybody was worried about the back pressure, and it actually helped the back pressure, because what they found was wind blowing hard in this way was actually causing more back pressure, and it slowed the wind down. So they actually had energy efficiency by putting these the grasses in there. And at 10 feet was what he recommended. There was no back pressure on the fan themselves. So his recommendations is anywhere from 10 to 20 feet away.
Where do you get that grass?
Just contact me afterwards and I can give you some sources for it. So.
We planted ours, we're 20-some feet away. They've been 28.
Yeah.
Whatever they told me to, I did.
Okay. Yeah, they've made some changes. I'm not sure what the recommendations are right now through NRCS. Was it done through cost share?
Yes.
Yeah. Because at the time they thought that the back pressure on the fans, and after Dr. Lee did some tests on it, the recommendations were to move them a little bit closer. Sometimes you can't help it because there's roads there, so you got to, just do the best that you can on that. And one of the things I like about, we have planted trees down the center of the houses as well, and sometimes the trucks aren't the most accurate. So, they hit a tree or something's going to hurt the truck and the tree. If they run over the grass, it doesn't hurt them. And on this end, you'll see where the cooling pads are. We put trees that are going to get tall to provide shade. Because what Bob Malone did some experiments a few years back and found out that if you cool the air before it goes into the cooling pad, it actually saves some energy as well. You're pulling in 80-degree air instead of 95-degree air. So we've looked at planting shade trees around the cooling pads. I have a lot of people say I don't want to plant trees around my chicken farm because the wind blows them over on the chicken house. And my thoughts are, you plant them by your house if you don't care if your wife gets smashed. Everybody wants shade trees around their house, but don't put them around the chicken house. I don't want to say those. And as far as I know, I've not seen any of the trees fall over. Try to use trees that don't blow over on chicken houses, and I don't know of any that have fallen on chicken houses that we have planted. So.
You have a certain species of grasses that work better with the tunnel fans?
I'm going to argue with Jamie on this one. Different species of the grasses. NRCS at Cautia requires that you use a switchgrass. The switchgrasses that they recommend get about 6 to 8 feet tall. Problem with the switchgrasses are that they have a tendency of falling over. And another problem is they self-seed. So if you're a grain farmer, you will find switchgrass growing everywhere. We use a sterile hybrid miscanthus. It gets about 10 to 12 feet tall. You can't use it if you're getting kosher. If you pay for it yourself, you can use it. And I can tell you that I've done work with Sean Belt from the USDA over in Beltsville, Maryland. We planted different species of grasses, and the farmers that we have done that on their property say, get away from the switchgrass. I want the miscanthus because it's so much taller. And we've seen pictures where you have tunnel fans blowing right on soybeans, and you can see a little curve there where it's killed out the beans and stuff. Put the row of the miscanthus there, you can literally walk behind that miscanthus when it's full grown and not feel any breeze coming through when the fans are running.
If you've got an existing area that's in fescue, do you have to work seed bed for that?
Nah, just stick it right in the ground. It'll take
Plug
over.
it right in.
Yep. Any other questions? If anybody wants any sources or anything, I've got some cards I can hand out. We're supposed to stamp your little pads for you, so we got a lot of people. Huh?
I'd do that.
Yeah. We wouldn't have got you here if it weren't for that.